Hello! So I finished my first Eurorack module, so I thought I'd show that off. It's a kick and hi-hat module based on the Teensy 3.6 microcontroller and the Teensy audio library. There's a couple sources that I should mention. One is the Teensy drum module made by otemrellik, which I based a lot of my kick drum architecture around and some of the schematics. And secondly, the blog Thea.codes, which is the blog from the makers of the Winterbloom Eurorack modules, which has awesome documentation on the build process of their modules and also their electronics involved. There's a few differences to Otem's design that I wanted to incorporate. One, I wanted to have separate outputs for each voice so I can run them through some individual processing. And I wanted a lot more control over the tone of each voice on the module itself. And that's what the 4 knobs are for. Each voice has its own gate trigger input that's coming from the KeyStep Pro. So we've got separate gate or trigger inputs. On the bottom here, one for the kick drum and one for the hi-hat. And then on top, there's an output for each voice that are going to a mixer. All right, let's have a listen to what the knobs do. Let's start with the kick drum. Top left, we have pitch control. And that's mapped to chromatic notes, so tuning is a little bit easier. In the top right, we have the envelope, attack decay control, which goes from very short to a very long boomy sound. Bottom left is the swoop control. This is the pitch envelope, and that's separate from the amplitude envelope. And turning to the right increases amplitude of the envelope and the attack and decay. Last control is split. Turning it to the left introduces a click. That adds a lot more punch to the kick drum. Turning it to the right adds a bit of drive just through hard clipping. Okay, onto the hi-hats. Just a little bit of white noise running through an envelope and a filter. The first knob controls filter mode and cutoff frequency. Turning it to the left turns the filter into a low-pass filter with decreasing cutoff frequency. And turning the knob to the right turns it into a high-pass filter with increasing cutoff frequency. The knob on the top right is the same as the kick drum. It's the AD envelope, attack decay envelope. Which goes from almost constant noise to very short clicks. The bottom left is a frequency envelope on the filter. Turning it to the left turns it into a negative frequency envelope. Turning it to the right turns it into a positive frequency envelope. And the last control introduces a bit of randomness to the volume of each triggered hi-hat. There's this one weird thing about the hi-hat that's worth mentioning. In some combinations of frequency cutoff and frequency envelope, there's this weird glitchy sound that happens. Right here. But it sounds kind of cool, so I didn't really bother trying to figure out how to fix it. It does also stop the randomness from working, which is sad. I'll play around a bit with the knobs to show off some sounds. Cool, let's run the voices through some processing. I have the hi-hat running through the microphone delay and the kick drum through a blades filter. Getting some wave folding on the kick drum. Yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to show off. I'm really happy with how the sounds especially turned out. The tone controls are really cool, and there's a large range of things you can do with each voice, so that's really awesome. And especially if you start to introduce some extra effects from some other modules, you can get some really funky sounds. For my next project, I want to see if I can make a snare and a clap synthesizer. The schematics for those should be exactly the same as for this module. It'll just be a question of changing the code. And I also want to try and make those into PCB, because I've never done that, and that seems kind of interesting. So stay tuned.